So you don't charm the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil finds his groove in them rhythm and blues that sound. It's gonna get you sun in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Sother Teague.
And I'm Greg Benson, and I have returned to the United States of America. I was visiting our neighbors to the north in Canada, specifically
Canada.
Ontario, Canada, specifically Toronto, Ontario, this
All right.
past week. Before I give my thoughts on it, Sother, when was the last time you were there?
Toronto, it's been 15 or more years, to be honest, and I've only been once. So, far enough that it doesn't matter. But let me ask, and I probably know the answer. Why were you there?
Well, there are two or three things that I usually travel for. Which one of them do you think this one was?
Knowing where you're from, and it ain't there, I'm going to eliminate one of the three things that you travel a lot for, which is a wedding. I don't think you were there for a wedding, but I will throw in, I bet you went there for baseball.
I did go there for baseball. I was there for a baseball game. I've also been doing some freelance stuff with a Canadian company for a while and never actually met some of the people that I have worked with, in some cases for 5 years. So I got to have dinner with them as well. So that was really lovely.
That's cool.
Yeah. It is a fascinating city. It is a place where it seems much like New York or Los Angeles or London, where if the thing you're after is a real item that exists in this plane of reality, you can find it within 24 hours somewhere in the greater Toronto metro area. We're Americans, and especially us New Yorkers, we're very, very guilty of defaulting to the assumption that we're the center of the universe. And it was very lovely to go there and see bars that I would consider incredible and world-class, and a city that has a great public transportation system. And you know what there was a lot of on the cocktail menus there, Sother?
Let's hear it.
Sherry.
Espresso martinis. Oh,
Sherry.
Pretty
much every bar I went to had a sherry cocktail prominently featured. It is the summer of sherry. It's happening, at least in Ontario, Canada. It is the summer of sherry. They're celebrating it. It's only a matter of time before it sweeps through the rest of the world as well. And just everyone is just going nuts for sherry cobblers on the patio by July.
Man, I feel like the sherry debate has been going on for years and years and years. Everyone thinks every year is going to be the year for sherry. It's sherry and rum, and it's just never come to fruition. Although, as we mentioned on last week's episode, I've been to 3 bars recently that had sherry cobblers on menu. So maybe it's finally breaking through.
It's happening. I know that I've been wrong the last 7 years. I've predicted it's the summer of sherry, but this year it's really going down.
We'll see.
And I also just want to say, like, this is a bit, and it's a bit that I really enjoy. And I really don't care if anyone else finds it funny but me, because the point is that I think I'm hilarious. But I just want to warn you and our listeners that if this actually turns out to be the summer of sherry, I am going to be absolutely insufferable. The I told you so's will be loud and constant and unceasing, and I will be virtually unlistenable. But again, I don't care, because I was right. Summer of Sherry 2026. It's happening.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Also, while we're here, I want to say a quick thank you to everyone who has rated and reviewed the show over the last couple weeks. As you may remember, we put out a call to anyone really who's listening to the show who enjoys it and enjoys hanging out with us and enjoys our guests to give us a rating and a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine luxury podcasts like this one are downloaded. The reason for that being, I discovered that there is another podcast out there called The Speakeasy that for some reason is a Christianity podcast. Like it's a little, it verges a little bit into trad. They haven't posted recently about the fact that they have political beliefs that I consider antithetical to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Wonder why? Maybe they're getting a little bit disillusioned. I could listen to their podcast to find out, but I don't want to, because frankly, I think it's weird that they're called The Speakeasy, and I don't like it that they have more ratings and reviews than us. So for those of you who listen to my call to action to help us leapfrog them, thank you. You're the salt of the earth. For anyone else who's listening, if you like this show, if you want to recommend it to some friends, if you enjoy hanging out with us and our guests and our silly, dumb bits, and you're looking forward to the summer of Sherry, please, please, please consider giving us a rating and a review on your platform of choice. I would really, really appreciate it. And I want to
Me too.
leapfrog these people in the rating and review game so badly. You have no idea. So I would consider it a personal favor if you went ahead and did that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let's get it out there.
Let's do it. You know who else we should get out there, Sother?
No, who?
We should get out there. In fact, he's been out there for a while, but let's get him out there again. We have in the studio with us the editor-in-chief of Imbibe Magazine, which is 20 years old this year, which means it is so close to being able to legally buy a drink. I'm sure it can almost taste it. He also produces and hosts the Radio Imbibe podcast. We have the one and only Paul Clarke. It's great to see you, man.
It is great to be here. Great to be chatting with both of you.
Glad to have you, brother. It's always a pleasure to see you. I look forward every year to hanging out with you. We usually have a couple of meals together down at Tales of the Cocktail every year, and I look forward to it every year. So Happy to see you an in-between moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I look forward to that as well. And it's always good to chat with you and to be a part of this wonderful podcast. And really, I should just back up and say, I really should have thought twice before launching this second podcast about my personal faith and calling it the Speakeasy. I should have asked you guys. So apologies for that.
As long as we can spur our listeners on to jump us ahead of them in ratings and reviews, we'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. We're perfectly comfortable with you existing so long as it's in second place.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. And as we mentioned, this is you're now, I guess this is the start of the third decade for Imbibe Magazine. And so to kick us off as a little time capsule, and because the Y2K aesthetic is really hot right now, take us back to 2006. What was the media landscape like when you started this magazine?
Well, so first off, just to clarify one thing, I personally didn't start the magazine. The magazine was founded by Karen Foley, who continues as the founder and publisher of Imbibe, and we work together and have worked together for over 20 years now. I came in with issue number 1 as a writer. I actually drove to Portland, Oregon in the fall of 2005 and applied for the job that I have now. Didn't get it, but I got hired as a writer, which was actually probably better because that gave me a chance to kind of get out there in the media landscape a little bit more, write for a number of different folks, including Imbibe. But at that point, in 2005, when the incarnation started coming together, and in 2006, when the first issue came out, there was not a drinks magazine out there. There were some trade magazines, things like the old Malt Advocate, now Whiskey Advocate, and things of that nature. But there's nothing on the consumer shelf, like next to Gourmet or next to Bon Appetit or next to Savour, that really focused exclusively on the drinks world, on spirits and cocktails, beer, wine, coffee, you name it. Now, fast forward to today, 20 years later, we've all seen a number of different publications online, in print, come along exploring the cocktail space, exploring these avenues a little bit more. But, at the time we came in, it was kind of like a sensibility of what do you do if you want to be like Bon Appetit or like Gourmet Magazine, but without the food, just focusing exclusively on the drinks. And that was kind of the landscape we were coming into at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and like obviously quite pioneering, right? As you were really the first to hit the shelves in that way. Like, what sort of stories were you covering back then? Like, what was the big? You said you've been involved off the air. You said you've been involved in every episode except one of the 100 plus episodes that have come out in over 20 years. What was that first story about, and what were some of those early stories about?
Right. Well, so May, June 2006 was our very first issue. And the story I contributed to that was a profile of Ted Hay, Dr. Cocktail. And I call that out for a couple of reasons. First off, Ted's awesome. And he wound up becoming a regular columnist for Imbibe for a number of years. But also it kind of was us planting a stake from the very beginning, paying attention to the history and the heritage of cocktails and saying, it's one thing to go out and plumb what bars are doing right now and showing, kind of cool, fun cocktails. But also we wanted to remember that the cocktail world exists with this historical perspective. And so we wanted to add some depth and some gravitas to it by including that as part of the first issue and being really part of every issue. We always go to that part of our world. One thing I should call out also about that inaugural issue that came out is a story that came out. We're focusing on Oaxaca, and it was kind of like, hey, have you guys heard of mezcal? And if you go back in 2006, most people hadn't really tried mezcal yet. It was starting to creep in some places. Ron Cooper is still going basically door to door or bar to bar, turning bartenders onto it. But right there from issue number 1, we were seeing something that was coming up, and like, hey guys, we should maybe pay attention to agave spirits because this might be a thing in the years ahead.
It is the original summer of sherry, just like, watch out. It's going to be, just trust me, it's going to be popping off. And that brings up a question I wanted to ask, which is, I often say that the best way to be successful is to have made a really smart decision 5 years ago. So as mentioned, you were some of the first people into this space reporting on it. And that meant that you got a front row seat to a lot of these trends that we now take as foundational for where our industry is today. Did you ever feel like, man, I placed a really smart bet because now I get this front row seat to watch Sasha Petrosky and Jim Meehan really take off and do their work?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things was, when the magazine first came along in 2006, I had already plumbing my own personal cocktail nerd world for several years at that point, which of course in those days meant being online in places like the Drink Boy Forum or the eGullet Forum, where you might just have a chat about cocktails with Toby Maloney or Audrey Saunders, folks coming on, sharing, different recipes, different things they were working on. And so from that perspective, I could see something kind of evolving, something, the primordial soup out there of cocktails and like how everything was about to, evolution is about to kick in. Things were about to happen very quickly. And so I think part of it was once the magazine came out and once we started working on some of those issues, part of it was looking at this world that we knew that was happening is like, oh my God, we have to tell everybody about this. This is so friggin' cool. So, some of those early issues, we would be like, okay, guys, we need to bring you up to speed on what rye whiskey is. At that point, there were what, like 6 brands, something like
Right.
that. You a few things. Then you had Fritz Maytag doing his weird thing in California, but really, like, it's mainly like the brands you can count on your hands.
Yeah,
but
Jim Beam still had a yellow label. Remember the yellow label?
Exactly. Like Old Overholt or nothing.
Uh-huh.
Like the Wild Turkey Old Overholt debate. But at that point, it was like bringing people up to speed, mainly from a cocktail perspective, saying, okay, if you're seeing these craft cocktail bars, which are starting to increase in number, this is something they're going to be seeing a lot of bartenders using, and we need to bring you up to speed on that. And we've continued to do that, especially in our first 10 years. When we saw absinthe first coming along to regain its legal status in 2007, that was something I was, kind of flagging down Karen at the magazine saying, this is about to happen. And we should really do a story on this because this is about to happen. It's going to be big. And it was at the time. It was a huge thing when absinthe first started flowing again freely in the United States with Ted Bro and St. George Spirits doing their amazing work. And so seeing some of that from Advance and then saying we need to bring this to the wider public, to our consumer audience.
This is one of those there are two wolves inside of you moments, I feel, because whenever you are at ground zero for something that you can tell is going to be really big and really exciting, I think there are two conflicting drives that at least exist in me whenever I feel that way. One, I have to tell everybody about this because this is the coolest thing in the world. And I get to be the one who is, Prometheus sharing the light of this. And the other part that's, I don't know, I kind of want to keep this just between us. Like, I kind of want this to be like a me thing and keep it among the people, this community of folks who are just as passionate about it as I am. Did you ever feel that way?
To some extent, but I think there's a real desire there, recognizing that these things are going to get out there anyway. These stories are going to get out there anyway. Here's an opportunity to tell the story on our terms, or to see it in such a way and say, okay, there's something cool here. But going back to my initial point, there's a historical perspective. There's some kind of ground, some kind of foundation for this cocktail trend, for this direction, whatever it is. We want to make sure that people, when they get into it, that they understand the full context of it and can see the full picture. And really, we made that part of our identity. So by telling the story ourselves and getting ahead of the story ourselves, we can help frame the way people think about it.
Yeah, and I think that you obviously you've done a great job of that, and that's why the magazine's still so popular and has been around for as long as it has. Like, you were there to give these stories some light and to do it in a way that was, factual and backed up by, the truth. As we kind of broke containment on what is now the sort of cocktail revolution, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you guys have both worked in the cocktail world for a number of years, so I'm sure you've come across this at some point. There's a lot of BS out there, and
you don't say.
I know. Sorry to disillusion you, but yeah, there's a lot of falsehoods or just misunderstandings or just bad stories going around. And so to the extent that we can try to clean that up as we go along, or actually get into some of the true background, some of the true history of things, share that as part of our stories. Again, we can go back to that. Just by framing the story in that way, you can hopefully set an expectation for everybody who comes after that is a model that they should follow as well.
Well, this brings up something that I'm kind of curious about, and this is going to be my storm cloud side coming up. I know that that I can
usually my
switch
job.
hit. I was going to say, yeah, I feel like I switch hit between being the sunshine person on this podcast and being the downer. But on my Thanos was right days, I do kind of have this sense that maybe looking back at the 2010s, there was a little bit of we were fiddling while Rome was not burning, but maybe starting to smolder a little bit. The economy was good. We had all of these flavors. There was seemingly a new awesome ingredient behind the bar every single day. Did you ever look at all of that and think, maybe this is the high water mark? Like maybe this level of involvement and access can't last?
It crossed my mind something along those lines because we noticed, in the early years of the cocktail renaissance, basically in the first decade of this century, information was being shared freely. Everybody was putting stuff online. We're all learning from each other. It was really cool. Everything was really booming. Then once a lot of people started making money off of it, really. Then you saw, a little bit more cloistered, or people just became more familiar with the public relations universe, which puts another layer between me and you. And it's necessary, and it functions in a very necessary way. But it can also function as a buffer sometimes where I don't have the direct access. I remember years ago when I had, a question about a cocktail recipe, just texting Jim Meehan, during his time at PDT. And he would respond right back to me, no publicists involved. Nowadays, unless if I know you directly and I've known you for a while, then I'll text you directly. But typically, I'm asked to bring a publicist into the middle, which again, they have their function. It's useful, but it does put that kind of barrier sometimes. I think one of the things that we've tried to take into consideration also, this isn't exactly what you're asking, but it was what was coming to mind, where you see all of this stuff going on and this immense creativity and a lot of growth in the industry. But at the same time, you look at the outside world and it's absolute catastrophe going on in our larger culture in some ways. And yeah, it feels weird to say, here are 8 cute cocktail recipes. Meanwhile, democracy is eroding. So especially within our second decade, we leaned more into the culture side of the equation. From day one, Imbibe has had the tagline "Liquid Culture" on the front cover of the magazine. And we focused on the liquid for the most part for the first 10 years. The most recent decade, we've leaned more heavily into that culture aspect and the people working in the industry. What does it mean? We've done pieces on what is the historical role of immigrants in bar culture? What are some of the aspects of climate change in the wine world? And we're looking at these larger things in our world, in our culture, and asking how can we tell those stories in a drinks format, because we're still a drinks magazine. How can we tell it to our audience and send these, bring these things in, make them approachable, make them understandable, but also make them realize that your understanding of drinks can be about the recipe in front of you, or about the wine that's in your glass, but it goes into the place and the people behind all of that.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about like what sort of changes you might have had to make, or, as you said, as you moved into the second decade, like, what changes had to be made based on COVID? What changes had to be made based on the fact that physical media seem to have taken a huge hit? And then are there any changes coming soon because physical media seems to be coming back into the favor?
Right. So this is where, to go to your earlier question of where may we have seen something early on and getting onto it. We launched in 2006. I mean, launching a print magazine in 2006, that was like, it was idiocy. It was like you had already started drinking at that point, because the writing was on the wall for print media at that point. Like, why would you put ink and paper together? That's a 20th century technology. Everything is moving online. And then years later, as you said, yes, people are returning to print media. We've always been here, man. We've been doing it for 20 years, and it's at the core of what we do. Everything begins with Imbibe Magazine, and magazine is an ink and paper, things that you can pick up with your hands. And one of the things that we did for our 20th anniversary issue, which is out now, is I went and I called up around 6 or 8 of our longtime subscribers, folks who had been with Imbibe since, if not issue number 1, then since 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. people who've kept the subscription for that long. And I just want to say why. Why have you supported us over the years? Just out of curiosity. And one of the reasons I got from people was that tactile aspect of something they can pick up, they can have in their living room, they can have in their kitchen when they're going to make a cocktail for their friends. They can just flip to a page. They can keep it in binders. They can clip out recipes, or they can keep entire collections, like the way that your grandmother saved National Geographics. We found people all across the spectrum, which is fascinating to see how people use your work. And it's one thing to like bookmark something in your browser or save it on your phone, but if you have something physical in your kitchen, especially food and drink related, I think that comes to a different level. It gives you something you can relate to more, and then you can go back to more readily.
Yeah, I was just out visiting our mutual friend Eric Castro in San Diego, and in his house, mounted on the wall, he has a magazine rack, and he has a subscription to several different magazines, Rolling Stone, Imbibe, I'm sure was in there, Cooks Illustrated, etc. And he's like, yeah, I can switch off, I can read my magazine, and there's no pop-up ads, and there's no infinity scroll. When I'm done with the magazine, it's done. And I'm, kind of unencumbered by the world around me when I'm in that world, and I think that that's coming back. We had while I was at his house, we were reading magazines, and we had a long discussion about how physical media is making a comeback.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of people are really realizing that now, and Gen Z is realizing that as well. And one thing, to come to your earlier question of how, when COVID came into it, how did that factor in? Yeah, it was kind of a freak out factor, because if you recall, early in stages, we were afraid to touch everything, or send anything through the mail. We just, like, well, we're going to have to figure that one out. But one thing that affected us early on with COVID was we couldn't do photo shoots, because typically we were running a feature, we're going to come into Amoria, Margot, send a camera in, do Sother behind the bar, mixing his drinks. We couldn't do that. So for our July-August issue of 2020, our summer drinks feature, we hired a regular illustrator, Maddie Newton in Portland, Oregon, and he illustrated the entire issue for us.
Wow.
Drinks recipes, feature articles, our character's profile, just send a photograph of the person profiling. He did original illustrations for the entire issue. And so it took that flaw and we made it into a feature. How do we take something that could absolutely screw us and just spell devastation, professionally, and turn it into a feature and turn it into a collectible issue. And I think, I went through all of our hard copies of issues a couple of weeks ago in paper, and was looking through that issue again, reminding myself, well, that was really cool when we did that. I mean, we did it for the worst reasons, because, we're terrified of certain death, but, it came out, and you go back and look at it years later, like, that was actually kind of cool.
I mean, really cool. What a smart move.
Yeah. And I mean, the other part of your question, sorry to cut you off. But the other part of that question was with COVID, obviously we've always had an online presence. We've always been on social media. We've always had our website going on. But during COVID, when we couldn't have the kinds of conversations at Bar Convent Brooklyn or Tales of the Cocktail like we normally do, we launched our Radio Imbibe podcast. And that was the rationale behind it, because it was, well, we're stuck at home. We can't talk to people any other way. Let's do it this way and share it with our audience. And now almost 6 years later, we're continuing on.
So this brings me to today. We've covered the heady fun days of the cocktail revolution and the depressing last 6 years we've all been living through. What are the stories that you're covering today, and what, in your opinion, are some undercovered stories that you wish people would write about more?
Well, one of the things that we started doing, during the pandemic is we actually did have to do a reformat of the magazine in some ways, because up to 2020, one of the things we'd always done was, or frequently done, was run a destination style feature article, like, great cocktail bars in New York City, great cocktail bars in Singapore, things of that nature.
Yeah, that would be kind of mean to put out in August of 2020, huh?
It was, like I think our May, June issue for 2020, we were going to press as everything started shutting down. And so we ran great bars in Atlanta. And I remember, like, we had to go back and add like a quick little box on the front page, like, we don't know what's going to be happening in May, are things going to be open? Nobody has any idea what's happening. Right. And so we haven't gone back to that format yet. Instead, we needed to fill up some of those pages. So we introduced what we, in our house, or in-house, we call our mini feature, which is just a short feature. But the thing is, it's about half the length of our typical features. we found out that we love this section because that 1,000 word mark gives us a point where we can really kind of take a narrow focus on some aspect of the drinks world. That 2,000 words would be too much, but like you need more than just a little blurb somewhere. And we've done some really great stories in there, things like the history of date milkshakes in Palm Springs, or the use of garum and umami rich ingredients in the cocktail world, or how salt became so inextricably linked with agave spirits, kind of touching on those little things. So we've been leaning into that, and we've had some really great story ideas come into us from writers over the past couple of years. So that's what we've been leaning into more recently, and what we're looking forward to more in the future, where we can do these kind of tight focus, getting into the stories we might not previously have been able to cover for one reason or another, but kind of following that out and seeing where those lead us.
I feel like it's two modes that happen, right? It's creativity or nostalgia. And I think I know the answer, but where do you think we are right now? Are we trending more creativity, or are we trending more nostalgia in this sort of post-pan world?
It's, my default response has been creativity, because that's what you see so much of, especially if a lot of your information is coming in via social media and via Instagram. We're seeing the creativity, but I think the nostalgia is something we need to recognize is out there. And especially some of the bars that are leaning more into familiar cocktails like the martini, like we're back in martini land, but people going back to those familiar, easy cocktails, but where they're done in a very just perfect kind of way. So I think, it's kind of hard to divine right now in 2026, when the world is kind of crap out there and politics are kind of crap, and people want the reassurance, they want the escapism, and sometimes they don't want a 15 ingredient cocktail they have to highly think about. Yes, a lot of times they do, but also there is that room for the perfectly rendered classics that kind of feel familiar, feel comfortable. And so I know I'm kind of punting on the question away, but I think it's kind of both right now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think we're in a place of both, and I think that dichotomy exists because I think the consumer right now really likes to go out for creativity, really likes to see that creativity in social media and things like that. But at home, they're craving to make nostalgia, right? I don't think that we have as many people as a lot of bartenders would like to think, especially the sort of creators on social media platforms that are making the cocktails that they are being very creative about at home, right? I think the home user is pretty firmly locked in nostalgia when at home, but when they go out, they might want to dabble into the creativity, and also then be anchored by a nostalgic drink as well, right? You might go and say, I'm going to have this milk punch at Schmuck, but then I'm going to follow that up with a classic Manhattan down the street at Amori Margo or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. There is room for both of these things at the same time. And I think, our readers, a lot of times, they're looking for creativity. They want to find things and find recipes and find ingredients they were not previously aware of, and maybe things that they can tap into. But at the same point, there's a level, there's a certain level that you don't want to push them past, where, you don't want to have somebody buying 3 different bottles for one cocktail and they're never going to use those again. So if we're calling for an ingredient, it needs to be something that we can say, okay, you can do a bunch of stuff with that bottle. You're not just going to drop $30-$40 on this and never be able to use it again. So trying to find those things that are creative, but that also have that kind of accessibility and approachability. And that's where I think the nostalgia in a way comes in, and it's kind of the comfort and the familiarity that also factors into it.
You've been speaking about your readers like you have a very clear idea of who they are. And that's important for any publication or podcast of any that hopes to have any longevity to do. You have to have a very clear idea. Okay, this is who I'm talking to. You have to have sort of a platonic ideal, a kind of an avatar of who exactly this is for. And you were mentioning, we're not going to do that to our readers where we're going to make them buy 3 different bottles of these very, very obscure fortified wines and Amari, the summer of sherry aside. But what I wanted to ask about is, how has that person that you're speaking to changed over the last 20 years?
Well, I think one of the things is, one of the things I should really point out about Imbibe is our home office, our global headquarters are in Portland, Oregon. And Karen, our publisher, our founder, is from Georgia and lived in Georgia and South Carolina. I grew up in the cosmopolitan environment of Tahlequah, Oklahoma. We've lived in big cities. I've lived in big cities my entire adult life, in Seattle, San Francisco, New York City. But you always remember that small town kid. But the point point is, you want to be able to, if we're writing something, we're writing a cocktail recipe, writing a story, we want to make it of interest and as approachable to somebody in Muskogee, Oklahoma, as you can in Manhattan. Right? Because if you're running a cocktail recipe, we can't just be focusing exclusively on like a New York City or Chicago or LA audience. It needs to be something that folks can find the ingredients, that they can find. You can't call for some fruit that's only in season for 1 week out of the year and you can only find it in one county in California. We need to make things where people can actually find the flavors and find the ingredients. And we do factor that in to our thinking on every single recipe that we're running in the magazine. Sometimes, we'll go there. We'll go a little bit further out there with something that was not, would not be thought a commonplace cocktail ingredient several years ago, something like yuzu, for example. But we've done our research to find out, okay, can you find yuzu juice? How widespread, what's their distribution like? You can find, like if Whole Foods has it, okay, well, so somebody in Tulsa can do this, fine, let's do this. But I think that kind of whole foundation that is not in New York City and being on the West Coast and being from smaller towns and thinking about the smaller towns, that really resonates. And, one of the things I love is when I go to Tales of the Cocktail every year, in between having lunch with Sother, I like to just, kind of pull up at one of the many bars in the French Quarter where you might find visiting bartenders, maybe attending their very first Tales of the Cocktail, and asking them where they're from. And it's fascinating for me to run into a crew from Anchorage or to run into a crew from Tulsa, Oklahoma, because then I can actually have a conversation like, okay, you're familiar with Imbibe. What is valuable to you? What is useful to you? What is a pain in the ass to you? Are we running something and you're like, I can never make that drink in my bar because there's no distribution of XYZ product here. So it gives us some real kind of informed perspective from people working on the ground and not in major media markets. So we can find and continue to address and satisfy that audience all across the country.
Yeah, but do you find that maybe also limits what you think you can, put to press? That are stories that probably should be told, even if everyone can't get a hold of those items?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the story is. It's one thing where we can tell a story about a culture or context where spirit, if it's not widely distributed, but at that point, we're leaning more into the culture and the context. So, for example, something like Bacanora, which is not widely distributed all across the United States, still, very kind of like a small market kind of thing. Main market, small appearance kind of thing. But there's a fascinating story behind Bacanora and the culture that makes it in Mexico. And so we can tell that story. We can tell the story about the people, and that will motivate our readers to maybe learn more about Bacanora. It might motivate them to start searching for it when they're traveling, and that can help drive that kind of interest in that demand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, basically, that's kind of what you did way back in 2006, talking about mezcal, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't available everywhere. Rye wasn't available everywhere. You created a story that made people interested, so then they began to demand the product, and then the product had to meet its demand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's planting the seeds this way, but also knowing from having done this for a number of years, you get to know, like some of the importers, some of the distributors, and knowing where they're functioning and where their markets are. Let me use the example of household pens, right? Household pens, basically everything in their portfolio is nerd juice, right?
Yes.
It's a nerdy cocktail stuff, but they are in markets all across the country and they understand their markets very, very well. So if I'm asking, sometimes we might be thinking, running a piece on some kind of aperitif wine or some kind of bitter or something like that. And I might just shoot a text over to Jake Parrott from Household Pens to say, you guys handle this. Is this like, are people buying this? And he might say something like, oh my God, people are nuts for this in Omaha. And that's a cool kind of insight to know that this isn't just New York City bartenders or Chicago bartenders that are using this particular ingredient, that people in home bars, and in smaller restaurant bars all across the country are finding some utility here. And that also informs us to say, well, okay, maybe it's not as hard to find as we initially thought. The thing is, cocktail nerds, our people are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we are. And not so much in the shadows either.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't shut up about it. Yeah.
If you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, I've got some bad news for you. You are only getting about 60 to 70% of the conversation that we had today with our guest. But if you want to hear the whole thing, you can join us and become a regular on our Patreon.
That's right. To hear the rest of the conversation, join us on our Patreon, become one of our regulars, and you'll receive all kinds of perks, including ad-free listening, so you won't have to hear us do this again.
And in addition to ad-free listening and longer shows, you are also going to get cocktail recipes from all of our guests, access to our live monthly hangouts, and a free cocktail kit each and every month from our good friends at Shaker and Spoon.
So head over to Patreon and become a regular of the Speakeasy. We'd love to have you there. Cheers. I got something a little off topic here, but I wanted to ask, like, what's one prediction that Imbibe Magazine would have confidently made back in 2006 that might seem or look ridiculous today?
Oh my God. You know,
I love that response.
it's hard. You know, it's hard to go back and think of that time. You know, I think some of the things, you know, some of the things that did come to pass and that were true to some regard, but like it was true, like in a very kind of narrow nerd focus kind of thing, where like, you know, bitter and stirred cocktails, when, you know, brown, bitter and stirred took off, we're like, oh my God, the world, you know, the future is brown, bitter and stirred. And like, yeah, a little bit, but you know, people also want different things. And so, you know, going back to that kind of mentality where like the world is this, or like when absinthe came out, like absinthe is going to be everywhere. Everybody's going to be drinking absinthe. Well, you know, at first, and it's still, you know, there in drips and drabs, but it never, you know, there was never like the absinthe moment or the pisco moment. You know, like we're always waiting for, you know, it's like the summer of sherry. Is this going to be the summer of the sherry cobbler? We've been saying that this is our 20th year saying the summer of the sherry cobbler. You know, I think we
Stick
can look
to your
at things
guns,
like,
man. Don't let the haters get you off your game.
I mean, remember Neil Bodenheimer opened up a bar called Belloc that was all cobblers.
I
and
thought it was amazing,
2 years.
but I was like one of 8 people, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's those kinds of things where we went down the rabbit hole, maybe went too far down the rabbit hole, and needed to kind of walk it back a little bit. But, you know, they're always kind of the false starts or like the things that go out there, and is it going to resonate? Nerds love it, but I need to pay the rent.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Paul, I remember very distinctly in early summer 2018, one of my reps came to me at the bar I was working at. I was like, dude, this is going to be the future. Like, this is going to be the big drink of the summer. It's going to blow up. It's light. It's refreshing. It's got a little fruity flavor on it. It's called a hard seltzer. And I was like, so it's like a vodka soda in a can? He's like, well, technically, no, it's not a vodka soda in a can. But basically, yeah, that's kind of the drinking experience. I looked this guy dead in the eye and I said, that's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard.
Listen, nobody's going to buy water in a bottle. Nobody's going to buy chicken in a bucket. Yeah, these things are ludicrous. I got one more to throw at you that's a little bit, you know, softball, but fun. What do you think is the most influential drink of the last 20 years of Imbibe? Not the best drink, the most influential drink.
You know, okay. So I was having this conversation recently with our friends Francis Schott and Mark in New Jersey.
The Restaurant Guys, another great podcast.
The Restaurant Guys podcast. And one of the things that we were sharing, like, if you go back to 2006 and look at the way that, like, you know, cocktail people were drinking. Okay, first off, like Manhattan. We loved Manhattans. We really got into our shaken drinks. We were like, oh my God, the daiquiri is really cool. But even at that point, if you put a Negroni in front of somebody, especially a non-industry person, you're going to scare the crap out of them, right? Mm-hmm. The Negroni is not a beginner's cocktail. It's you know, it's something you need to have some kind of game plan. You need to have a little bit of palate experience to really start getting into Negronis. And to see now, 20 years later, you know, the sheer number of Negronis and Negroni spinoffs and Negroni riffs out there.
Negroni Week, sponsored by Imbibe.
Negroni Week, sponsored by Imbibe. It's probably gone further in some ways than any other. Like, if you go back to those kind of original core of classic cocktails, I think the Negroni has gone further, faster than any of those, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great answer. Well, tell us what you think the next 2 decades look like for Imbibe.
Well, wow. You know, we're still working through anniversary coverage right now. I'm not even ready to look ahead to that. I mean, one of the things, as I said earlier, we started off focusing, you know, almost exclusively on the liquid side, you know, bringing people up to speed, getting them informed on what things like rye whiskey or Yennefer or absinthe were, so they have this kind of foundational understanding of the drinks in their world. Our second decade, we lean more into the people and the culture side into that. I think both of these obviously are going to be combined and continuing on, but I think We're going to be coming to a better understanding of different places and different regionalities and the way those function within our drinks world. And this is, not to get too like bio-regional on some of this stuff, but a lot of the drinks we're seeing now are more bio-regional, more informed by the produce and the things in their regions, not just in terms of cocktails. I mean, obviously that's been a part of the factor for a long time, but we're seeing that kind of metastasize as you look globally at cocktail culture and the different kinds of flavors and ingredients that individual bartenders in Singapore or in Africa or in Australia are bringing into their cocktails. Also in terms of the spirits that are out there, in terms of the gins and the amari and the different aromatized wines that the different people are producing, really kind of incorporating those factors from the regions into it. So I think one of the things I'm anticipating is looking at more places globally. And then there's one other aspect of our background. Like I said, we're based in Portland, Oregon. Our readership for the print magazine is primarily United States. Just simply, it's cheaper to mail it within the U.S. than elsewhere. But we're all connected by this massive digital world that we have, and so we're recognizing that we have a readership and an audience internationally. And we have started leaning into that already a little bit more this year. And you can see us continue to do that in the days ahead, kind of exploring some of our audiences and some of what the great bartenders and bars in places like Spain or Australia or Africa are bringing to the table.
I, for one, am looking forward to it, man. Like, I think I've been reading Imbibe since the very beginning, because I was definitely in those blogs that you were mentioning at the top of the show. Like, I was definitely lurking around on eGullet and certainly Drink Boy with Robert Hess. And I'm sure that when Imbibe came out, I was probably like, oh my gosh, we have something we can literally hold on to. So I'm excited for whatever you guys are going to do next.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, like one of the other things is, and I should mention this in the context of those blogs, is that Imbibe has always had a strongly visual component to us. We work with some amazing photographers and illustrators, and our art director, Molly Henty, does just a magical job of putting the magazine together every time. And I think really kind of leaning into that as well has benefited us over the years, because even if somebody is not, let's say, a martini drinker, if we can put out a 10-page feature on martinis and martini variations that is visually appealing and very engaging, then my friends, we have a new martini drinker among us. So right. It's like kind of using that as well to bring people in and to make it appealing and make it understandable to them.
Yeah.
I got to admit, when we were teeing up for this episode, I was a little bit worried it was going to be a downer because, media's had a rough 20 years.
I'm not done yet, man.
Well, do you want to, before I build us back up, do you want to break us down a little bit? Is there anything that you're particularly concerned about? I sensed some real actual
weight behind that.
Yeah, some weight. There was some weight behind that joke. Yeah.
Well, I mean, not intensely. I mean, like, it is 2026. We have the same concerns that everybody else has. I think tariffs and our international political situation is weighing on the world of drinks. It's weighing on the ability of bars and restaurants to remain open. It's weighing on craft distillers to be able to sell their product and move their product to international markets. This could have a serious impact on the creativity and on the money put in primarily by individuals and families, this kind of small level, independent level. All of this could take a hit from some of the things going on in the world today. So yeah, we have some real concerns about that. But when you look at the larger culture, people are always eating and drinking. What they eat and drink is going to change. We just need to pay attention to that and kind of stay on top of it, stay out ahead of it, and keep doing what we do.
And it sounds like you're optimistic about the fact that there are, like you said, every time someone sees a beautifully photographed martini, there's a new martini drinker out there.
Yeah.
Or at least someone who's interested in it, right?
Exactly. They can come in and they can order one. They might realize they still aren't quite ready for martinis, but they took that step, or maybe they learned that maybe the standard dry martini is not their style, but 50-50 or a Gibson or something like that, then maybe that's more their speed. We bring them into the family whatever way we can.
50-50 martini with a twist on a nice big rock. That's my stirred drink of the summer, man. I love that stuff.
With a sherry cobbler back.
I was about to say, where'd your sherry cobbler get off to?
There's room in my heart for more than one, y'all. Well, Paul, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for walking us through this rich history and for pointing us in a more hopeful direction than I was initially expecting. I really appreciate that. We like to end all of our episodes by asking our guests the standard question of where you drinking these days. What are some of your favorite local spots that you want to give some love to on this podcast?
Local. I mean, you travel a lot too, though. So local or otherwise.
I live in Seattle, Washington, and when I am wrapping up my work week, I'm in the habit now of wandering down the street to a little bar called the Doctor's Office. It's one of my favorite places here in town. Wonderful group of folks, fantastic group of bartenders working there. Other times during the week, another favorite spot in town that you can find me now and then is Roquette, Eric Hackenen's bar down in Belltown. Some of the best cocktails anywhere. Some of the best cocktails anywhere on earth. Let's just put it that way. Plus an amazing team that he has going on there. Great spirit selection, leaning very much into their French background and into agave spirits as well. And then there's a part of me that is always going to love the place where I first started learning about cocktails, and that's Zigzag Cafe, just right next to Pike Place Market here in Seattle. I was down there last week, had a lovely time, just like I've been doing for more than 20 years now. Some things are timeless, and we need to respect those places and continue supporting places that have been around for a long time as well.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to Roquette yet, but my first time visiting Zigzag, Eric Hackenen was there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Eric Hackenen was, I think, the head bartender there for around a decade, and then went off and launched Roquette as his own place back just before the pandemic started. So they're at around 7 years now, something like that.
Right.
But just a wonderful, wonderful bar, and just the nicest people on earth.
Well, Paul, I look forward to seeing you down at Tales of the Cocktail this year in a couple of months, and we'll catch up over some lunch, and we'll have I'm sure some great drinks. We'll hang out and enjoy the city of New Orleans.
I look forward to that, man.
Yeah.
In the meantime, where can our listeners follow along with your exploits? I know usually we ask people if there is a particular channel they want to plug on www.instagram.com, but you also have one of these. You got your very own podcast. Give that a little bit of love here at the end of the show too.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things. So you can always find everything we're doing or links to everything we're doing at imbibemagazine.com. And that includes just selecting that imbibemagazine.com/podcast to find out everything we've been up to. And if Instagram is your way to go, our handle is @imbibe.
Yeah, and you are Cocktail Cron, right?
I am Cocktail Cron, CHRON, because Chronicles was too long.
Agreed.
The days of the early internet where we were all like, no, people aren't going to have time for all of this. We got to make this short and direct and to the point. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on. It was a very directed to the point show, but also a lovely show. We really appreciate you here, and congratulations on 20 years, man. It's been great.
Yeah, man. Incredible.
Thanks so much. It was great chatting with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this week. But if you are feeling nostalgic for this show already, you can become a regular on our Patreon. Our regulars get ad-free shows, longer shows, cocktail recipes from all of our guests, and a new perk that we are rolling out this month, a curated selection of seasonal bitters from Bitter Queens down in a much-discussed city this week, New Orleans.
That's right.
They are a awesome business. They are small batch. They are queer-owned. So if you want to try some and support the show at the same time, swing on by and become a regular. And when you do that, you are also going to get access to our monthly after hours live hangouts where Sother and I get together in Meat Space to have a drink in real time with everyone who is a regular on this show. It is the last Monday of every month, meaning the next one is Monday, June 29th, which is going to be here before we all know it. So if you want to join us for that, June 29th, 8 p.m. Eastern, sign up and become a regular today. And now I'm going to kick things over to you, Sother. What's going on with our weekly sauced update?
On sauced, well, we're definitely moving into grilling season, so we've been leaning into that pretty heavily. And the episode that dropped yesterday is beer can chicken. Literally cooking with booze, right in the can, no less. So a great episode where we really get into the nitty gritty of beer can chicken. And then the following episode that'll be dropping next week is steak au poivre.
Ooh,
yeah. So we're getting into it.
I keep threatening to stop by and eat some of this food that you're making. I need to actually do it one of these days.
Well, Tim had a party back on this past Sunday, at his house where we were in the backyard and we were tasting a bunch of the things that we made for sauced. We had we were doing fried fish tacos using the beer batter that we used. We grilled, smoked some pork ribs. We grilled some chicken wings. We had a bouillabaisse pie. We made a pie out of the bouillabaisse that we made. So we get together. I think we're going to make this a thing where we get together once in a while and just have a party where we sort of spread out all of the things that we've just talked about on the show.
Excellent. And if you're one of our regulars, you can bid on the leftovers. I don't want to invite people to Tim's house, but if you want to throw in, like, you know what, I'll pay $40 for a little bit of that. It still looks like there's some meat on the bones of that beer can chicken. That is a privilege reserved only for our regulars.
That's right.
So check out. So that's a joke, by the way. That's kind of gross. You should become a regular. We have no gross perks, only fun perks. Check out Sauced, and be sure to tune in next week when our guest is going to be Justin Mead from Maison Telmont, which is a champagne house. I'm excited about that. We don't really talk about wine too much here, and it is definitely sparkling season. So be sure to tune in for that. Going to be really informative. But until then, cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll, Lord knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The